The billionaire stood at the jagged edge of the construction site, the last light of sunset bleeding across his bruised face as he struggled to stay upright, dust clinging to his torn shirt and his breath sharp and uneven. Police lights flickered behind him like distant warnings, and in the middle of that broken scene, Emma Carter, her hands shaking, her eyes red from crying, held something close to her chest, something she couldn't bring herself to reveal yet. Her voice was barely more than a whisper as she stared at the man whose life she had saved only moments earlier. "I didn't mean for this to happen. I just wanted to do the right thing." And in that instant, the world seemed to turn on her. Moments earlier, she had been a hero, but now she was the one everyone accused. How did one simple act of honesty collapse into chaos, heartbreak, and truth? Before we dive deeper, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And if you're new here, click on the subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Let's go back to where it all began. Caroline Adeyemi was 28, the kind of woman whose strength came from necessity rather than choice. Every morning she tied her boots, knowing two younger siblings were counting on her. One still in secondary school, the other barely old enough to understand why their parents never came back home that night years ago. She carried that memory like a weight beneath her ribs, a quiet pain she never spoke about. On site, she was known for her integrity, returning lost tools, standing up for new workers, taking the shift no one else wanted. Yet behind that steady smile was exhaustion, the kind that settles into the bones. She worked through blistering heat and long evenings, not because she wanted to, but because survival didn't wait for anyone. And although her co-workers trusted her without question, none of them knew the full story she kept locked away, a story that shaped every choice she made without ever being spoken aloud. Vincent Cole arrived at that same work site miles away from the life he once lived, 33 years old, soft-spoken, and carrying the heaviness of a man who rarely shared what hurt him. He was the CEO of two major real estate firms in the U.S., a billionaire by any definition. Yet he carried himself with an introverted gentleness that made people wonder what he was hiding. Returning to Nigeria wasn't a business decision, it was a quiet retreat, a place he hoped might help him recover from an emotional wound he never talked about. People whispered that something happened in America, something that changed him, something involving a regret he never addressed. And though the world saw wealth and success wrapped around him like armor, underneath it all he struggled to sleep, haunted by a past mistake that followed him across continents. No one on that construction site imagined he was living with a secret enemy determined to break him. The stakes for both of them were rising long before they ever exchanged a single word. Caroline needed her job to keep her family afloat. Any disruption, any accusation, any misunderstanding could take everything from her. Vincent, on the other hand, was walking in the shadow of danger without realizing how close it had finally come. And between their two separate worlds lay a single object, a misplaced wallet, ordinary on the outside, but carrying information powerful enough to change both their lives forever. Neither of them knew it yet, but they had already been connected long before that tense parking lot moment. Their paths had crossed in ways hidden beneath years, secrets, and choices that were now rising back to the surface. Caroline's days started before the sun rose, long before the noise of machinery drowned out her thoughts. She arrived on the site with her helmet tucked under her arm, shoulders tight from the weight of responsibilities she never asked for. The air smelled of dust and diesel, men shouting instructions across the yard as cranes creaked into motion. She hauled bricks, mixed cement, tightened bolts until her hands ached, pushing her body harder than most people twice her size ever would. But even strength has limits. That afternoon, when her supervisor snapped at her for a mistake she didn't make, something inside her trembled. She turned away, blinking fast, fighting the sting in her eyes. For a moment, she stepped behind a stack of cement bags, shoulders shaking, whispering a prayer she had said 1,000 times before. "Please, let something change." But deep down, she knew change never comes gently, and never the way we expect. Miles away from her private struggle, Vincent stepped into a quiet neighborhood store, hoping for one simple day without pressure. No assistance, no security team, no reminders of the empire resting on his shoulders. He picked up small items, bottled water, snacks, a notebook, just to feel normal for a moment. But as he reached for his wallet, his phone lit up with a number he recognized instantly. His jaw tightened. That call wasn't from a friend, it wasn't from someone he trusted. It was from a past he wished he could erase. He let it ring, ignored it, turned the phone face down on the counter, pretending he didn't feel the unease creeping through him. In his distraction, he didn't notice the wallet slipping from his pocket, landing quietly near the store entrance as he walked out. To him, it was just another small oversight in a stressful day. But to someone else, it would be the beginning of everything. Caroline finished her shift late, sweat drying on her skin as she stopped by the same small store to buy bread for her siblings. She almost stepped on it, a sleek leather wallet lying near the edge of the mat. She picked it up, turning it over in her calloused hands. Inside were foreign IDs with Vincent's name, crisp dollar bills, multiple business cards, and a few personal notes that hinted at a man who carried more burdens than most. Her friends nearby nudged her, whispering that it was a blessing, that someone like her deserved a break for once, that she should keep it and walk home quietly. But Caroline shook her head. She couldn't take something that wasn't hers, not even when life kept testing her. With a steady breath, she closed the wallet and slipped it into her bag, determined to return it. What she didn't know was returning it would put her in danger.
Caroline walked back into the small shop with the wallet held carefully in both hands, hoping for a simple solution. She approached the cashier, a middle-aged man who barely looked up as she explained what she'd found. Instead of helping, he waved his hand dismissively and said it wasn't his problem, that whatever fell outside the store wasn't his responsibility. She tried calling the number listed on one of the business cards, pressing the phone to her ear as the tone rang once, then cut off. She tried again and again. Nothing. A woman standing nearby narrowed her eyes at Caroline, stepping closer as if she smelled wrongdoing. "People like you always pretend to return things after taking what you want," she muttered loudly enough for everyone to hear. Caroline's heart thudded painfully. She hadn't taken a single thing, but already she felt the weight of judgment, and she couldn't understand why everyone seemed so eager to stop her from simply doing what was right. At that same moment, Vincent slid into the back seat of his car, ready to head home, when his hand reached into his pocket and met nothing but empty fabric. Confusion struck first, then fear. He searched the car seat, the floor, the dashboard, even checking between the cushions as panic rose in his chest. The wallet wasn't just a bundle of cards and cash. It held a confidential contract tied to a high-stakes project he had been quietly managing, a project that could determine the survival of his two companies. More personal than that, it carried a small, worn photograph he had never shown anyone, one that tied him to a decision he regretted deeply in the U.S., and buried in the inner pocket was something far more valuable than money, something only he and one other person in the world knew existed. If that wallet fell into the wrong hands, everything he built could collapse. Caroline stood outside the office building where the business card said Vincent might be, her palms sweating, heart thudding in her chest. She had rehearsed her words the entire bus ride there, but now, faced with the sleek glass doors and uniformed guards, she felt out of place. When Vincent finally stepped out of the building, his expression tense and distracted, she almost lost her courage. But she called his name quietly, holding the wallet out with both hands. For a moment, he stared, unable to believe what he was seeing. Relief washed over his face so deeply it softened every line of stress he'd been carrying. He thanked her once, then again, speaking with the sincerity of a man who understood exactly what had been saved. It was gratitude too heavy, too emotional for two strangers meeting for the first time. He reached into his pocket, offering her money, insisting it was the least he could do. Caroline stepped back, shaking her head gently. She didn't want the money. She just wanted to return what wasn't hers. And in that quiet refusal, Vincent saw something he hadn't seen in a long time: integrity that didn't come with conditions. The next morning, Vincent returned to the construction site not as the powerful CEO everyone feared, but as a man who felt he owed someone more than a rushed thank you. He asked the foreman if he could speak to the woman who had returned his wallet, and as Caroline approached, he noticed details he hadn't seen the day before. Her hands were bruised and rough from work, her uniform smudged with dust, but she walked with steady confidence. He watched her lift a stack of materials with ease, then turn around to help a younger worker struggling with their task. There was a gentleness in her voice, a quiet strength in the way she moved, a resilience that seemed woven into her every gesture. Something about her lingered in his mind long after he left the site. He didn't know why, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Their conversation started small, almost hesitant, as if both of them were afraid to disturb whatever fragile connection was forming between them. Vincent would stop by the site during his breaks, pretending he was there to check progress, but really he was looking for those few quiet minutes when he and Caroline could talk. She told him about her siblings, how she worked double shifts so they would never feel the same fear she once felt growing up. She shared memories of simple meals, laughter over cheap candles during power outages, and dreams she never said out loud. Vincent listened with a kind of attentiveness she wasn't used to, nodding gently, asking about the little things that mattered to her. She still had no idea who he really was, no idea that the man standing there was worth billions. To her, he was just a humble, soft-spoken man who asked questions because he cared. And for Vincent, being seen that way, simply as a person, felt like a relief he hadn't realized he needed. For once, he wasn't a CEO or a public figure, he was just Vincent. But outside those quiet exchanges, pressure began to build like heat rising off steel. Caroline's coworkers noticed the way Vincent looked for her, the way he lingered near her work area, the way she smiled whenever he walked up. They teased her, sometimes playfully, sometimes sharply, suggesting she was wasting her time talking to a man who probably didn't have anything serious in mind. She brushed off their comments, but the rumors spread faster than she could stop them. People questioned her motives, whispered behind her back, and accused her of running after someone she barely knew. She tried to focus on her work, tried to ignore the voices that chipped away at her peace, but the tension clung to her like dust she couldn't wash off. Yet none of them knew the truth. None of them understood that the real danger was still coming, and it had nothing to do with love.
The truth found her on a day that began like any other, with the clang of metal echoing across the site and dust rising beneath heavy boots. Caroline was tightening bolts along the framework when she heard the sudden screech of polished tires. A sleek black SUV rolled to a stop near the entrance, its windows tinted, its engine too smooth for anything ordinary. A uniformed driver stepped out, straightened his jacket, and called out respectfully, "Sir, we're ready for you." Caroline froze. She turned slowly, expecting to see someone important walking toward the car, someone wealthy, someone powerful. Instead, she watched Vincent step forward. The driver held the door open for him. Workers around her paused, whispering, confused. Vincent avoided the attention, offering Caroline a small apologetic smile as if he wished none of this were happening. But the damage was immediate. He wasn't the humble man she thought he was. He wasn't a simple visitor or a quiet friend. He had a driver. He had security. He had a life far beyond anything she could imagine. What shattered her completely came minutes later, as she walked past a busy intersection on her break, trying to clear her mind. She looked up, and there it was, a towering billboard with Vincent's face printed across it, announcing his newest real estate venture. His name in bold letters, his title, his wealth, his world. She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, heart pounding, betrayal sliding through her like a blade. Every conversation, every gentle moment replayed in her mind, suddenly twisted by the weight of what he never told her. He had hidden who he was. He had let her speak about her struggles while he said nothing about the empire he owned.
And in that moment, the truth was painfully simple. She didn't fall for a billionaire. She fell for a lie. If you're still watching, drop "I'm still here" in the comments. Let's see the real viewers, because everything is about to shift. Caroline turned away from the billboard and walked off, shoulders shaking, refusing to look back. She didn't want his explanations. She didn't want his apologies. She didn't even want the connection they shared just days before. All she wanted was space to breathe, space to stop feeling foolish, space to forget the man who wasn't who he claimed to be. What she didn't know was that as she walked away, danger was closing in on both of them, danger that cared nothing about lies, heartbreak, or pride. The moment Caroline walked away, the quiet tension exploded into chaos. On the construction site, whispers had turned into pointed fingers, and by the afternoon, coworkers were openly confronting her, their voices sharp with accusation. Rumors traveled faster than dust in the wind. Someone posted a story online claiming she had stolen from Vincent. Others shared doctored images, and before long, social media was ablaze with judgment. Headlines framed her as dishonest, as though a single act of honesty had somehow betrayed the man she'd tried to help. Caroline felt trapped, isolated, watching as her world crumbled around her while people she had trusted turned their eyes away. Meanwhile, Vincent was discovering that danger had a far more calculated face. Someone had accessed the wallet before it was safely returned, removing the private contract and sensitive documents tucked inside. A rival company, opportunistic and relentless, now held the power to destroy everything he had built. The chaos wasn't random, it was engineered, and Caroline, once a stranger, was now being dragged into the center of it. Public accusations mounted, her name smeared across articles and blogs, and she couldn't understand why the man she had helped now seemed so far away. At home, the fallout reached her family. Her younger siblings faced teasing and threats at school, classmates cruelly referencing a story they barely understood. Her boss hinted at termination, suggesting that her poor judgment had made her a liability. Anger and fear tangled together in her chest, and Caroline found herself blaming Vincent for the storm that now surrounded her. Every thought circled back to him, to the man that had seemed kind, gentle, trustworthy, the one she had risked so much for, and yet somehow he had become the symbol of everything that was falling apart. Vincent, watching the damage, felt desperation clawing at him. He tried to reach out, to explain the truth, to untangle her from the web that had trapped her, but Caroline refused to listen, hurt and pride twisting her decisions. He risked his reputation, publicly and privately, to protect her, offering evidence, testimony, anything that could shield her from blame. Yet every move he made only drew more attention, more scrutiny. And as they both struggled under the weight of chaos, the universe had one more revelation in store, a truth connecting their pasts that neither of them could have imagined. The tension reached its peak when the police arrived at the construction site, their sirens slicing through the afternoon heat and dust. Workers froze, whispers became shouts, and every moment felt charged, like the air itself had grown heavier. The stolen contract, the source of so much chaos, was finally recovered, found in the hands of a minor player who had underestimated the stakes. But the real revelation hit Caroline harder than anything else. As Vincent stepped forward, holding the document safely, he looked at her with a mixture of awe and gratitude, his voice steady but filled with emotion. He told her something she had never imagined. Her late father, the man who had died when she was just a child, had once worked for his family. He had been more than an employee. Her father's last act, the only memory he left behind, was saving Vincent's mother from a near-fatal accident, an act of bravery that had shaped Vincent's very life. And now, decades later, the circle had come full circle. Vincent's eyes met Caroline's, tears threatening, as he said, "Your father saved my family, and you saved me." In the days that followed, Vincent worked quietly but decisively to repair the damage that had upended Caroline's life.
He ensured her name was cleared, publicly and privately, standing beside her as the truth replaced the rumors. He offered legal support, not as a favor, but as a gesture of respect for the woman who had acted with unwavering integrity. Caroline watched as her family's reputation was restored, her siblings no longer afraid, her life slowly regaining its rhythm. And in the midst of it all, she found herself looking at Vincent differently, not as the billionaire she had unknowingly trusted, but as the man who had chosen to protect her at every turn, who had seen her courage and honored it. Forgiveness came slowly, tenderly, and with it the beginnings of a bond that was grounded in respect, honesty, and quiet understanding. A relationship that could grow without pressure, without pretense, built on the foundation of two people who had saved each other in different ways. Sometimes love doesn't appear in roses and candlelight. Sometimes it appears in dusty boots, honest hands, and a single act of integrity. If this story touched your heart like it touched ours, hit that like button. It helps the channel more than you know. And don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories every week.